In the season finale, it's tough for Joe, but he's got to get rid of Marianne's body. Normally, he would dump the body, but he knows that Juliet is going to want closure for her mother, so he just leaves her body on a park bench, and then he gets rid of the cage. The next day, he heads off to work, but the whole situation is really all I can think about. He's kind of just going through the motions in class, and that's when news breaks that Reese Montrose's body has been found. That gives him the opening to just end class early because everybody's surprised by this news. But one person who didn't even show up for class was Nadia. She stayed away because she dove into who Joe Goldberg was. And when she Googles that name, everything that pops up, it's troubling, and it definitely is her professor. She ends up meeting up with Edward once he is released from class, and he's a little confused about their relationship. The way that she's been acting, he's worried that she was just kind of using him. And she apologizes, saying, no, that's not it at all. She's just really frazzled by everything that's going down. She actually really appreciates him in this moment. Because she feels like she's going crazy, and having Edward read exactly what she's reading regarding Joe Goldberg would do her some good, because then she would know that she's not crazy. Edward reads the articles that she found on the internet, and then she goes to show Edward the cage in the building, but it's gone, and she's shocked. She feels at that moment like she actually is going crazy, because she has no idea what happened to it. She starts frantically trying to explain to Edward everything that happened with Marianne and the cage and finding it, the key, everything. The only question that Edward has is, why didn't you involve the police? And she explains that if she involved the police, they would poke around and he would run. She needs him dead to rights. That's going to involve digging into this and trying to catch him. Some kind of evidence that connects Joe to Jonathan, to the murders, to everything. Joe, though, is currently getting ready to flee the city. One of the things he wants to do is write Juliet a note so that Juliet doesn't believe that her mom died a junkie. As he's doing this, his inner self reminds him, you are not suicidal. What his inner self is worried about is this recent report that Reese Montrose's body was found, because there's not much that they can't do to connect Joe to the body. So while Joe's concerned with Marianne and Juliet and just ending this cycle, his inner self is concerned about staying clear. Staying out of jail, not getting caught. As he's arguing with his inner self, he gets a text message from Kate asking him to come over, and he does that. He knows that this might be the last time he actually sees her, so he jumps at the opportunity. She tells Joe that she went to go visit Phoebe, and Phoebe was able to figure out what a leech Adam was, and when she gets better, she's going to leave town. Leave all that influencer lifestyle behind her. Start fresh. She then admits to him that she was planning on leaving town and cutting Joe off, because she realized that she had been falling a bit in love with him. That really scared her because she's had trouble in the past with boys. When she was 18 and 19, she had boy problems because they would never stick around. She never could figure out why these guys were leaving, and then one day she overheard her father had hired somebody to follow her around. So she broke into his office and she found a file regarding everything. Everything she did, everything she had done, and everybody who she had done. When she confronted him, he said, I'm your father, and the world isn't safe. I need to protect you. She then tells Joe about what her dad told her the previous day, about how he was involved in just about everything regarding her life. So to bring it back around, the reason why she was going to cut Joe off was because she was worried that Joe was sent there by her father, that he's not even real. And he assures her, Kate, I am very real. She starts crying in his arms, saying, he owns me. And he just consoles her. He knows he has to do something regarding Tom, so once Kate goes to bed, he texts Tom from Kate's phone saying, let's meet at your airport hangar. And Tom is very quick to reply, yeah, sure, no problem. But Kate isn't heading there, Joe is. He knows that he'll be able to get Tom one-on-one. He sneaks in and tries to sneak up on him, but he's caught and he has to quickly come up with an excuse on why he's there. He stumbles over his words, but he starts asking Tom if it's going to be a problem that they found Reese's body because he figures that his DNA is all over it. And Tom assures him that it will not be a problem because he's got so many people in his pocket. The first chance he gets, though, when Tom turns around, Joe pounces, putting a chloroform rag over his face and then knocking him out. He ties Tom up, and now he's able to do whatever he wants with him. Now that Tom is tied up, Joe explains why he's doing what he's doing. Because ultimately, Tom Lockwood continues to hurt his daughter, and that's just something that Joe's not willing to let happen anymore. Tom tries really hard to get Joe to take a buyout, offering him just about anything he wants, but this isn't about money for Joe. It's about protecting Kate. The situation does get a little hairy, though, when Tom's security comes back from grabbing food, but Joe is able to kill him right then and there. And then he kills Tom. Having two bodies when he just expected to have one doesn't become an issue because now he has a murder-suicide on his hands. He ends up framing Hugo, the security guard, in the murder, saying that Hugo was blackmailing Tom for money. It went sideways. He ended up killing Tom and killing himself because he couldn't live with it. Because Joe has so much experience in this, he sets a very interesting crime scene where that is the only reasonable conclusion that one would have. It was just a really jealous, hard on his luck security guard trying to extort money from his boss. After he does dump the bodies off in a location that can be found pretty easily, he heads to the closest bridge that next morning. And the whole time, his inner self is trying to convince him not to do what he's about to do, but Joe is dead set on ending this cycle for good. His inner self starts to get really desperate, trying to convince Joe that he's actually a good person. But Joe knows that this is only going to continue if he continues to live. He knows that he's just going to continue to kill, and it's never going to end. So he needs to take matters into his own hands. He says goodbye to this fake Reese, and then jumps in. But as soon as he hits the water, he immediately regrets his decision. Thoughts about everything that's transpired in his life come rushing into his head, and he has the will to live. And luckily, he does get that chance because somebody saves him, taking him to a hospital. He does wake up in this hospital, and he's pretty surprised to be alive, and that's when the doctor comes in and explains what happened to him. But when the doctor leaves, Kate comes in, because she had no idea that he was even suicidal. She's pretty pissed off at him for this suicidal attempt. But when she actually sees the state that Joe is in, she realizes just how severe this attempt was. It's clear to her now that the guy that she'd fallen in love with isn't as well put together as she thought. She knows that this guy doesn't need to be yelled at, he needs to be consoled in this moment. Joe tells Kate, I didn't want to hurt you. But Kate, I've done terrible things. I've killed people. And he really fights with himself to even tell her this because he feels like he just got her back, and by telling her this news, it's going to push her away. But it actually doesn't. It's not like she gets turned on by it like Love Quinn did, but she's simply understanding because she remembers what happened with her life and how she killed people, although the circumstances were very different. Kate then switches the topic to her dad, telling Joe, he's dead. When the news came out, one of the people that was close to Tom and his company, Cynthia, told Kate about what Tom had Joe do by killing Reese. She's not saying it judgmentally, she just wants Joe to know that she knows the truth. But she also tells him that the tests were inconclusive, so they're never going to know who killed Reese. She doesn't blame Joe for this. She actually blames her dad for it, because the way she looks at it, my dad made you do it. Joe starts to argue with her because he doesn't want her to have to cover up his mess, but she cuts him off and says, it's done. He's left me everything. I own the company now. I'm running it. I never would have thought of taking over the company, but you have made it possible to even conceive this type of future. That's all because you've gone and made me believe in myself. Because of what Joe did for her, she tries to repay the favor, telling Joe, I know you're a good person. She then suggests that the two stay together because they can keep each other good. But in order to do that, she's going to need to know about his past. And Joe tells her, starting with the fact that his name isn't Jonathan Moore, it's Joe Goldberg. This will allow Kate to use her resources to make it clean for Joe to return to the United States. But as these two are discussing their future together, Nadia and Edward are trying to prove that this dude is a certified psychopath. While doing so, Nadia fills Edward in on her bold plan, the one that got Marion free. That's right, Marion isn't dead. Everything that happened was all calculated, right down to the text messages from the nanny. It was Nadia who changed the nanny's number to make it her phone number. So when Joe thought he was texting the nanny, he was actually texting Nadia. They set it up so that Marianne would look completely unhinged and a suicide attempt would be believable. But what Marianne actually took was something that Nadia gave her to slow her heart rate down. She knew that Joe wasn't going to bury her, so Nadia, waiting in the shadows, saw where Joe took her and then woke her up. Marianne was able then to sneak off and return to her daughter, and Joe Goldberg thought that she just died. It was genius, and Edward is completely amazed by it. But now they have to prove that Joe is, in fact, a killer. They head on over to Joe's apartment, and while Nadia is inside looking for evidence, Edward is outside keeping watch. It doesn't take too long for Nadia snooping around to find the box and find the evidence she needs. and she starts snapping photos. But when she leaves the building, Edward's nowhere to be found, and she heads to their meeting place, but still, Edward is nowhere to be found. He's not answering his phone. It's weird. And that's when Joe walks up on her. He's been discharged from the hospital, and he figured that something was going on with Nadia just by the way that she had been missing school and whatnot. So when he came home and he saw Edward standing outside, he knew something was going on, and he killed him. Nadia is so frightened that she's staring at this guy that she knows is a killer that she drops her phone and Joe picks it up, looking through the photos, casually deleting them, and then slowly backing Nadia up to the curb where she trips over Edward's dead body. Nadia is frozen still. She has no idea what to do. She's in shock. And Joe uses this to his advantage, taking the knife that he used to kill Edward out of his pocket and casually putting it in Nadia's hand. He explains to her that he's not going to hurt her, but what is going to happen is she's going to end up going to jail for a long time. He's also going to set it up so it's going to look like Edward was the killer of Reese Montrose, and thus he is going to get away scot-free. No one's ever going to believe Nadia, and nobody does. When the cops arrive, she's thrown in jail, and she never even spoke on her defense because she knew that no one would believe her. All she can think about is what Marianne told her, that Joe always wins. And in this case, it proved to be right again. Now that everything in London is tied up, Joe and Kate are able to fly to the United States and take over Tom's company. They're leaving behind a couple of friends. Blessing and Sophie bought Sundry House after Adam died. They took it over. It's a place that Roald routinely hangs out after he returned from Germany on a hunting trip. He shot a close personal friend during this trip, although using connections, everything stayed out of the papers. And Connie usually joins them at Sundry House because he only lasted 9 days in rehab, and he still does a lot of drugs. Phoebe, however, was the one that got away. She was true to her word. She tied up all her business in London and left to teach English to elementary school students in Thailand. She's off the grid, no longer an influencer, and loving life. She's the only one who doesn't suck. But now, Joe and Kate are a power couple in New York City running the company. Kate did use her resources, and now the narrative is that Joe was able to get away from a psychopath wife in Linda Madre. It's an incredible story, and it's gotten Joe a lot of support around the country. Because of the story, they do have to do some interviews, although they have a PR person steering the conversation away from the tough questions. During this interview, they kind of just give each other a bunch of credit for Kate running the company so flawlessly, and Kate giving Joe a lot of credit because he spontaneously bought a bookshop that was closing down, which he tells the reporter, it's just a passion of mine. But another person is also in this interview, and it's Joe's inner self, that fake Reese Montrose. He's still there. But this time, Joe thinks that he can keep him under control because he wants to do things for the greater good, like change the world for the better. He knows that in doing so, he might have to kill, but at least now he has a woman right next to him who is supportive of everything he does. And that is the end of Season 4. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. Make sure to share it on your social media platforms and be nice in the comment section because nasty comments make me feel bad. I have a Patreon, I have subscriptions, I have merch. Go buy a t-shirt or something, that'd be cool. But just know if you don't do all that, I do appreciate you listening.